If you ask somebody who's been gaming a long time, they'll always tell you that games used to be harder. I think there's plenty of hard games nowadays, but it is fun to look back. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on GameRanx, the 10 hardest 2000s games. Starting off at number 10, it's Ninja Gaiden 2 from Xbox 360, which came out in 2008. Now, the first Ninja Gaiden was actually a pretty hard game, but Ninja Gaiden 2 was a lot harder. Why? Because the enemies were super aggressive, they do tons of damage, and wow, are there a ton of them. Also, the bosses can be incredibly frustrating and annoying, like the worm thing. I don't really know what to call it. That worm thing in New York. Or the giant turtle boss when it dies and kills you instantly if you're not blocking. You know, when the boss dies and kills you, it's basically the game telling you, hey, use the block function, okay? It's important. It's so important we'll kill you unexpectedly after you win. After. At number 9 is Devil May Cry 3, which actually really went ahead and did something weird. The original localization of Devil May Cry 3 in the US took Japan's easy and normal and made them into normal and hard. It is an awesome game, but the original version of that game is so friggin' hard. For some reason, the US release was harder. I mean, it got fixed in the special edition. They actually reverted back to the difficulty levels of Japan. But tons of people got to the Cerberus boss and never got any further, and that's just the first boss of this game. It was significantly harder than Devil May Cry 2, and a lot of people noticed. It's probably why, when they did the special edition, they went back to the Japanese difficulty levels. But it's also kind of weird on account, I remember a lot of stereotypes about Japanese gamers that they were somehow the real gamers, the hardcore ones. People who were beating Devil May Cry 3 in the US were the real hardcore gamers, though.
This party's getting crazy. Let's rock.
At number 8, Spelunky, the OG version that was freeware way back in 2008. Now, this game was a roguelike that was literally famous for being difficult by indie developer Derek Yu. Now, if you explain it, it sounds relatively simple. The game randomly generates caves and you spelunk. You explore them, different floors, collect treasure. But here's the thing, there's traps and enemies everywhere. There's fall damage, you can get killed by your own explosions, and failure can be fairly unpredictable. It can come out of nowhere and hit you hard. A huge reason why this game was actually so popular was just how crazy the out-of-nowhere deaths could happen. In fact, there are actually a lot of death compilations you can look up on YouTube that some are pretty darn funny because a lot of it involved explosions, physics, and just general silliness. And don't get me wrong, it could get a little tedious, but things aren't that memorable for no reason at all. At number 7 is Stuntman, way back on the PS2 back in 2002. Stuntman was this ridiculous game that had realistic car physics, at least for the time. Obviously, PS2 physics and PlayStation 5 physics and PC game physics are not particularly categorically similar. However, again, for the time, pretty darn realistic car physics. The point of the game was, of course, to pull off stunts, and a lot of them were quite complex given the fact that they were car stunts, and that makes for a pretty hard game. Not only were the stunts themselves fairly complex, the game was also very strict about whether or not you actually completed them. You had to do a lot of very precise movements, and that meant sometimes seemingly succeeding and finding out that you failed. Not only was it really strict in how proficient you had to be, you also had to do it quickly. The game had pretty short time limits, so you would hear, "Cut! That was too slow," a lot when playing the game. At number 6 is Dwarf Fortress, which is not an easy one to talk about in a short time frame because it's extremely detailed. To boil it down, though, Tarn and Zach Adams, two freeware indie developers, created Dwarf Fortress as a construction/management simulator, as well as kind of a semi-roguelike, which generates a world in incredible detail, not graphically speaking. The original version of it had a text-based world. They're currently working on a new version to put on Steam with, I guess, actual graphics. It's not that the text-oriented version wasn't actual graphics, it's that everything on the screen was made of text, which was part of why it was a difficult game. Like, the entirely text-based graphics required you to train your eyes in a manner that was, well, proficient in understanding what's going on at all. because frankly, it was almost impossible to. The thing that's interesting about it is that you pretty much definitely are going to lose eventually, no matter how good at it you are. The community motto, in fact, is losing is fun. But it's not just that you could lose in a lot of different ways, it's that the complex systems would often lead to compound failures or otherwise just weird things happening, like cats getting drunk because they get beer on their paws, which is fun, obviously. Dwarf Fortress. Play it. Be as engrossed and confused as the rest of us have been since 2006. I mean, it's freeware. And number 5 is La-Mulana, a Japanese game that never actually was officially released in English. In fact, people who are aware of this game are usually aware of the remake instead, which was pretty darn hard, however was not difficult on the level that the original version was, in part because the remake had 16-bit graphics and was a lot easier to tell what's going on, and the original had, well, 16 color graphics. The game was kind of an action platformer built on top of incredibly cryptic puzzles and, well, garbled English. The original translation patch wasn't exactly what I would call perfect, but it had pretty awkward controls and just an overall really high difficulty level. It was just a massive game with tons of bosses and areas to explore, and you pretty much needed some form of comprehensive guide to get anywhere because it was very difficult. At number 4 is FZero GX, which came to the Gamecube in 2003. Specifically, the hardest part about this game is the story mode. It's not just that, they designed difficult tracks or anything. The game is just really fast, and the competing machines are super aggressive. It's very, very easy to just constantly wreck your F-Zero racing machine if you don't know exactly what to do, which knowing exactly what to do involves playing the game a lot, because obviously track memory is a big portion of it, and also being able to predict the AI behavior, which kind of means developing a sensibility. I mean, there's not a lot else to it, besides the fact that in every possible way, it's just a really, really hard racing game. Think about how you would make a racing game hard. FZero GX is pretty much that. At number 3 is Ikaruga, which is a bullet hell top-down shooting game that if you look at the various republishings of since, sort of bill it as this game that redefined the genre. And I mean, in some respects, I think you could say that that's true. It came to the arcade in Japan way back in 2001, and we didn't really see it stateside until 2003 when it hit Gamecube. To put it very plainly and simply, it is an incredibly hard game. Bullet hell is not a joke. The amount of bullets on the screen at any given time in the game is absolutely overwhelming, and simply developing a sensibility of what's even going on is perhaps one of the top priorities you have to learn to do. On top of that, every game like this has its own form of gimmick, and Ikaruga's is that you could change the ship from black to white, which would allow you to absorb the black bullets or the white bullets. Obviously, if you're white, you absorb the white bullets. If you're black, you absorb the black bullets. This added a lot of interesting dynamics to the game, I think, but it also didn't make it easier because this mechanic was utilized to make the game harder. Instead of making it, oh, I can absorb half the bullets on screen, it made you keep track of what kinds of bullets were on screen so you could switch to absorb what was most important to absorb at the time. It's also a blast. At number 2 is Demon's Souls, which hit the PS3 on October 6, 2009. It's technically the first Soulsborne game. And with that in mind, it was pretty difficult and pretty cryptic given some of the unexplained systems. What do I mean? I mean how stats affect your character, weight limits, the world tendency system, which was a thing that made the game harder the more you died for some reason. None of it was particularly well explained. Some of it wasn't explained in any way at all. And on top of it, the game was just by default quite hard. There's tons of instant kill traps, bottomless pits, infinitely spawning enemies, trick bosses, I mean everything you could possibly ask for in a tough game that just seems hellbent on punishing you for even deciding to play it. It's all here in Demon's Souls. Can't wait for the remake. At number 1 is a game called I Wanna Be the Guy. A guy named Michael Kyan O'Reilly used the ideas from actually just ROM hacks of Super Mario World called Asshole Mario. They were essentially extremely difficult, sometimes kind of impossible Mario games to make his own game. And the entire point of the game is simply difficulty itself. It's got a lot of invisible blocks like in Mega Man. It's got gotcha traps, spikes, just tons of crap everywhere that is just It's mean. It is a mean game. It is certainly the descendant of Asshole Mario if you've ever played that. This game has been cited as inspiration for tons of different games, for instance Super Meat Boy, which didn't come out until 2010. We also do have some bonus games for you, including God Hand, which came out in 2006 on the PlayStation 2. It was created by Clover, the developers who made Okami, and would eventually go on to form Platinum. It was a game that had a dynamic difficulty bar, meaning the better you did, the harder the game got. On the highest difficulty, which was called Die, you could be killed in just a couple of hits, and enemies were a lot more aggressive. Moving on, it's STALKER Shadow of Chernobyl, which came out on PC in 2007. It was a hardcore survival shooter with some RPG elements. You could die super easily, either by enemies or simply from radiation, because it is a Chernobyl game, and there would also be anomalies that would appear and take your life. Finally, we have to land on a nice little nod to Trials HD, which came to Xbox Live back in 2009. It was this 2.5D puzzle/racing game that felt like Excitebike on steroids with puzzle platforming elements. It was famous for its ninja difficulty level, which created a hardcore fan community, and you would just not get anywhere unless you had a literal mastery of the controls. That's all for now, though. Do you remember any of these games? Did you play any of them? They were all very hard, and of course, we're interested in hearing about your experiences. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. So click subscribe. Don't forget to enable all notifications. As always, thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter, Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on Gameranx.